Hello, Melissa Crook here from the Field Podcast. Welcome to today's episode, Unmasking the Layers, Eating Disorders, Sexual Shame, and the Journey to Self-Healing with Leslie Draffin. The ways to engage with today's episode are as follows. Challenge yourself to look at your health in a different way. If you're constantly checking the number on the scale, start looking at how much water you drink in a day or how many steps you get in. If you feel like you don't have any time for yourself, start carving out small amounts of time to let yourself breathe. This might be in the car ride to work or on the car ride home or sitting outside the house before you go in at the end of the day, at your lunch break. So those are some examples of where maybe you can find those minutes. And even if it's just 4 or 5 minutes, these things add up and matter. A fresh perspective allows for different results and new ideas in your journey. We hope you find these helpful and supportive as you listen today to our powerful episode with Leslie Draffin. Thanks so much for being with us. Hello, Field Podcast audience. Welcome back this week. I have a new friend here with me, thanks to our good friends at Podmatch. They're always bringing me such insightful and interesting, smart women that I can have these conversations with. And this is another example of that. I have Leslie Draffin here with me today. And Leslie and I are going to I'm really excited about our conversation. She's doing work that is so in alignment with things we talk about here on the podcast of caring for ourselves well, caring for ourselves holistically, mind, body, spirit, mentally, emotionally, prioritizing our wellness. These are such an intricate part of the work that she does, and living authentically out of our own expectations from a healed sense, embracing all of our layers, all the parts that make us who we are without shame, without feeling like we need to keep secrets about that. She addresses this so intuitively. And she learned a lot of these lessons the hard way. And she had to go on her own journey before she got to the space where she is today. So I'm excited to share her story and background with you today as it unfolds through the talking points. She describes herself as passionate, purpose-driven, grounded, intuitive, resilient, a cheerleader, and a permissionary, which we're going to talk about that more because I love that word. Leslie Draffin, welcome to the Field Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Melissa. I am so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. Okay, we're going to jump right into it. Talk to me about prioritizing self-care in your life and what that journey has looked like for you. Because I imagine early on that was something that wasn't something you necessarily felt like was okay for you to do, or that maybe you needed permission to prioritize yourself. I'm guessing, but I'm going to let you kind of unfold and walk us through your journey with that.
Yeah. So, self-care for me, I think, didn't really become something I fully understood until I was in my mid to late 30s. And,
Mm-hmm.
in my 20s, I was doing the self-care that was the popular thing, very much centered around materialism and capitalism, where it was like a skincare mask here, girls' night out there, a bubble bath. And so for me, what switched was when I realized that self-care is self-serving. And I feel like there's that like mantra out there, self-care isn't selfish. Honestly, I think it is, and that's fine. And it should be.
Yeah.
Because it takes you getting a little selfish to understand that if you don't treat yourself as sacred, then you're not going to take care of yourself in the ways that you need to. And so self-care started to look for me like things that weren't that fun. Like, looking at my shadows, looking at my triggers, journaling and discovering, all the blocks that were holding me back. Now my self-care really does look like sticking to my somatic practices every day. When I'm in a microdosing protocol, spending time with medicine and being reverent and gracious to the medicine. And then, the little nitty gritty things that someone who's struggled with depression like myself sometimes still struggles with, which is the showers, which is the skincare, which is are we making sure when we are in a functional freeze that we're still changing our clothes every day? So that's sort of my progression with self-care. It's certainly been something that um, I've wanted to embody for a really long time, but it wasn't until I understood how to really love myself that I understood what self-care really could be.
Yeah. And my friend Erin Copeland calls it self full, which I love because you got
Yeah,
to make sure yourself is full of what you need to show up the way you want to. And it's meeting yourself wherever you are. And it can be different things every day. It can be different things in every season. And it's tending to whatever your body needs. Does it need rest? Does it need food? Does it need sleep? Does it need water? Does it need therapy? Are there things you need to unpack? Does it need movement? I mean, there's so many pieces. Spiritually, what does it need? Do you need to, and you said something so important, we will prioritize what we value, what we see as worthwhile and worthy. So if we don't value ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to prioritize that if we don't see ourselves as being worth that time. And that's such an integral piece of this journey. And so many times we as women, if something comes up, we will put ourselves on the back burner and we will make room for that other thing that comes up. And I had to realize real quickly, I've got to make myself a non negotiable too. I can't just move and adjust. Of course, life requires flexibility, but it can't always be me, the one that's losing when that adjustment has to be made. Is that something you can relate to?
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when I started my healing journey, which interestingly enough is 6 years ago in January when we're talking,
Mm,
um, I felt so weird about asking for the space in the mornings from my husband to do things I wanted to do because I was
mm,
doing meditation at that point and I was making weird sounds in our guest room. And I felt so nervous, so ashamed, so kind of scared to carve out that time for myself because of that whole thought that, oh, he's going to think I'm weird. He's going to think this and this and this.
mhm,
And he'd already seen me at this point, like, doing the self care routines that I'd mentioned before that felt very materialistic and kind of basic. And it
mhm.
took me finally asking him to do these things with me for me
Mm,
to feel comfortable enough to be like, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is when I'm going to do it. So for me, it wasn't as much of an issue having the time carved out. It was having the safety in our own home so that I felt safe enough to do the things and felt encouraged to do the things. And now, he has his own spiritual path and I have my own spiritual path. And so we each kind of hold each other accountable, be like, hey, have you done your thing yet? Okay, yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to do my thing. You can go do your thing on the other side of the house. We don't have kids. We have a puppy. So it's different. Obviously, my life is different than folks who have, little ones. But
Yeah.
it was tricky to figure out how to ask for what I needed.
Yeah, especially when you're not used to. I think that's a learned practice. And I talk about this all the time this season, this seems to be coming up a lot, but our nervous systems a lot of times equate safety with familiarity instead of
Yes,
safety with actually meeting yourself where you are with what you need in that moment. And so you have to retrain it that this new thing is safe, that I don't need all these warning signs and other things to show up and protect me anymore. I'm in a different environment now. That anxiety, that hypervigilance, that is no longer serving me. And so we're going to go and take this new route. And I think so many times when that happens, we will take that sometimes early on, that discomfort. We're so uncomfortable being uncomfortable that we'll take that discomfort as a sign that we're doing something wrong rather than realizing, no, your body has been trained, your mind, your system has been trained to operate X way for X amount of years. It's going to take some time for your system to accept this new reality as the right, best, healthiest way forward.
for sure. Yeah. I think the saying is like, we'll always pick a comfortable hell versus an uncomfortable heaven.
That is so
Because like
true.
that's what we know. We know.
Yeah.
But for me, what was interesting is, and now it's coming back to me too, because this came up in a mushroom journey as well. I have struggled my whole life with asking for what I need and using my voice to express what I authentically want, which is funny,
Yeah.
seeing as how I was a news anchor for 15 years, literally being paid to use my voice.
Wow.
So, yeah, multiple layers in there.
Yeah. Well, the irony of that too, and that's another, I think, reminder for us to, you never know someone's story. and don't make assumptions about what you're seeing on just a one-on-one in a social setting scenario or a workplace. That doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. And so being really mindful about that as we approach people and ask questions and get curious, or even, the danger of making assumptions when we don't have all of the information. This goes really nicely into um confidently setting boundaries when you finally figure it out. Okay, wait, well, this way of operating is not working for me anywhere. I've got to create some boundaries here around what I will engage in, the kind of people I will surround myself with, what is healthy for me and not healthy for me, how much of my time I can give away, all those kinds of things that you have to become accustomed to when you finally start prioritizing your wellness, and not just giving yourself away all the time. So, talk to me about that journey for you.
Oh, boundaries.
I know.
Wow. Yeah, I had them. I had none of them for so long in my 20s for sure. And it really came out a lot in my work where I would, you know, say yes to projects or say yes to doing, an appearance and being so deeply disconnected from my body's ability to tell me yes or no that I was always in my head. And so for me, what helped to be able to confidently set boundaries was to get into the body and understand, what does it feel like in the body for this to be a yes or a no. And I did that through a couple of things. One was aligning with my menstrual cycle, understanding what my unique cycle phases look like, what I need in each phase. And so when I began to set boundaries through the lens of my cycle, one, I would in the beginning just like blame my cycle, be like, oh, it's just this. And that was helpful. And your cycle will let you, and she's not going to be upset about the fact that you're blaming her for your boundaries. But it really did like help me understand and help me articulate to my husband and to my friends and to my family, I am not available during these days. I
Mm.
don't want, I love you, and do not call me. I will not answer. Versus 2 weeks from now, I am available for all of these things. And so for me, boundaries in my personal life do seem to shift cyclically. So do my
Yeah.
self-care routines.
Yeah.
And that really did start to help me understand what my body was helping me see that I needed. And so that's where I started, is what can I feel in the body, and how can that help me set this boundary? The other thing that really helped me was doing that work around using my voice. And I did that through somatic work, through vocal toning, through eating magic mushrooms, and, through coaching and all of those things. But as I was able to unleash the voice and understand how to say what I needed, boundaries became a little bit easier. But I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not great at boundaries with certain people in my life, my mother in particular. And I don't know if I ever will be, just because of the
Yeah.
nature of our relationship. And for me, that's not something that bothers me too much.
Hmm.
Um, but again, like, I guess I share that because I can talk about boundaries all day and then go and mess up in a phone call in 2 hours after this call, So I think that's, I guess the other thing I'll say is, for me, I give myself grace for that.
Yeah.
When I came
Yeah.
from a place with no boundaries, never learned that as a kid. Are you serious? I was a preacher's
Yeah.
daughter. There was literally no boundaries. There was a saying my mother had: we live in a fishbowl.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone is watching all the time. And I was like, oh, talk about in like the boundary of glass, this see-through invisible
Yeah.
wall. No
Yeah.
boundaries.
No
So
boundaries,
yeah.
and a lot of room for everyone to in bring their own judgments and expectations and all the pressures. And we'll get into that as we go along in this conversation. But something so important here that you said, a couple things. Cycles. My friend Valencia San Luis is a cycles coach, and we've talked about cycles on here before. Our cycles are, when we know how to manage them, when we understand how they work in our body. I talked about this with Isabella Thor as well. They're actually quite miraculous. They let you know when you've got more energy, when you need to be a little more reserved, when you've got a lot to give. when it's more of a time of thinking and processing and resetting I mean, there's just so many pieces to it. When you can come to understand it and then live out of that space, it really does allow you to meet yourself right where you are all the time and communicate that to other people as well. It's a really powerful, force that exists within that, and that somatic piece. I tell you, when I started my journey 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago now, when my system finally felt safe to kind of let down and allow me to feel all that had been going on, that I had been disassociating from and stuffing and ignoring, in some cases for 35, 40 years, other things not as long. All of a sudden, I just felt everything everywhere. And it really took some time. And as I slowly unraveled and unwound, I used EMDR. That was really effective for me. Slowly, these physical manifestations would subside or go away. And I mean, I had this numbness that existed in my midsection for months. I had this pressure in the crown of my nose between my eyebrows. It existed for months, went off and on. And it'll still come up every once in a while if I'm really deeply impacted by something, stress wise or anxiety wise. I mean, all these different spaces. And I'm like, has this been here all along? And they're like, and my therapist's like, it's been there. It just didn't feel safe to come out. And you're now opening the door. You've opened the tunnel, and it's starting to and then I had to learn how to really move through, feel, process. I mean, I would do my therapy with her, but then she would give me a physical activity. I'm like, all right, there was a lot of anger wrapped up in that. You need to do something really, go to an anger room or hit a wall with some pillows. I mean, there was all these different ways that I was able to find for me to help me process that. And so I and that goes nicely into, when we're looking at our health, we got to look at the emotional health, the mental health, the physical health, the sexual health, the spiritual health. There's so many pieces to our health. It's not just physical. And the connections between, I mean, at the end, we feel a lot of these physically, but we'll throw a pill at something and we won't ask ourselves, why am I feeling that? What is at the root of that? I mean, for the first couple of years I was in therapy, and I was seeing a holistic doctor. So he was looking at all the pieces. And even he is like, for now, until we can get to the root of this, we're going to put you on a blood pressure medication. I think this is probably hormone and anxiety related, but until we can get to the root of it, sure enough, a year and a half later, I was off the blood pressure medication because we did figure out I was learning how to regulate the hypervigilance and anxiety that had been living very vivaciously, within me. And it's still something that I deal with to this day. And I do still have one med that I do take for the anxiety piece to help me manage that. But I have a whole list of practices that are in place. But it was me understanding and recognizing all the places that I felt those things physically and how they manifested themselves through the anxiety, through blood pressure, through racing heartbeat, through headaches. I mean, there's just so many manifestations. So talk to me more about that. And then also how you found the healing road that you're on now to treat those, because we talked about this before, not one size fits all. And there's a lot of modalities out there that are available. And if you haven't found yours yet, keep looking. There's something that will work for you. But talk to me how you decided to go on the journey you were on. Because on the outside, you looked great. You were this successful anchor, beautiful, out there with the people, engaging, all those things. And at some point, you had to be like, this is not working.
Right. Yeah. So, to talk about and to talk to that whole idea of supporting all the aspects of yourself, not just your physical body, I suffered from eating disorders for 20 years.
Mm.
And I was like perfect BMI, probably low on the low BMI, but like, you know, where a doctor would be like, great, check off. No doctor except one ever talked to me about my weight being low. And what was so interesting, it's because, I was so focused on that aspect of my life, hyper focused on that aspect of life, um, that in reality, it was just a symptom of my disconnection to my body, to be hurting my body in the way that I did for 20 years. And so you asked how I got to where I am now. So, and this is all retrospect, right? Like, isn't that so funny how we always know when we look back? So I, yeah, spent 15 years as a news anchor. I left in the middle of 2022 because of my mental health challenges. But for me, when I started my healing journey at 2019, I dove really hard into not only therapy and the Western medical model to try and help my anxiety, to try and help my depression, but meditation and podcasts and journaling and manifestation and affirmations and crystals, like all of the things, right? All of
Mhm.
the woo things.
Yeah.
And so, like you mentioned, I looked from the outside in like I had it all together, but in reality, I was really suffering. And for me, what I
Mhm.
uncovered is that I had and have always had a deep wound around feeling worthy and feeling worthy of love. And
Mm.
so when I was 18, 4 weeks, excuse me, after I lost my virginity, I was diagnosed with herpes. And my
Ugh.
dad's a preacher in the deep south of the United States, super conservative. And so this shame that just manifested in my entire body activated that wound that I'd had since birth because I'm also adopted. So I had like in utero trauma that very
Mm.
likely was again the wound around unworthiness. I was in a foster home for a month, like as an infant. Who can say what was happening in my little
Yeah.
subconscious?
Yeah.
But that shame spiral activated within me not only a worse eating disorder, but also here comes alcohol. Here comes alcohol
Mhm.
abuse.
All the things that
And
we can do to soothe and not feel.
for sure. And the other thing I did to soothe and not feel was to become an overachiever. I already was, but become addicted to this hustling and achieving. And so 15 years into my news anchoring, I am at the peak of overachieving. I'm at the peak of trying to prove how much I deserve love. Like in my mindset, especially, I got divorced in my late 20s. And in that year afterwards, I saw it come out so heavy. Like, how can I prove to these new partners that I'm so lovable? Oh, look, I make all this money. Oh, look, I have this amazing job. Oh, look, this and this. I look like this. And
Mhm.
so it all came crashing down as one does when I really
Mhm.
began to look into, what was my emotional health like? What was my spiritual
Mm.
health like? What was my um, sexual health and my pleasure body feeling? And so I tried that therapy. I tried meditation. I tried even embodiment practices, and nothing worked for me until I started to microdose magic mushrooms. And so you talk
Mm.
about different modalities for different people. I never even tried psychedelics until I was in my 30s. I was
Mhm.
absolutely a dare kid. And so, and I was still anchoring and I was doing things that were not legal where I was, right? And
Mhm.
so I took on a lot of risk and I had to address a lot of internalized bias and taboo to find a modality
Yeah.
that worked so deeply for me. And it
Mhm.
shifted things like catastrophically in some ways, but also
Yeah.
like I think that sometimes you need the chaos to rise out of those ashes. I'm
Mhm.
sober now for more than 2 years. My eating disorders are gone. I've stopped actively dieting. Now I have a more holistic approach to the way that my body looks and the way that I handle that. And now the table is steady, right? So when you look at the
Yeah.
pillars of your health, there's all of these legs on a table. For me, it was like the physical thing was all I had focused on, and I had become hyper focused on it. So that table leg was so long. The table was like a lopsided mess. And now they've come back into being even, where you can actually sit at that table and holistically approach life.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's so interesting when you finally, because when you're in it, when you're hyper vigilant, you're focused on achieving. I very much came from a background where it was very conservative. There was a very particular idea around the way girls were supposed to conduct themselves, what was and wasn't appropriate. Had a very traumatic experience when I shared with my parents that I had, had sex before marriage and all these things, and how I was made to feel within that, and how I felt about myself within that, carried that for years. It's a very abbreviated version, but it impacted so many. It impacted my marriage for years in ways I didn't fully understand. It impacted how I saw myself. That I have to keep showing up in the best way possible because I am awesome and I gotta keep being and achieving and being great at everything so everyone can see how awesome I am. And I will over explain everything I'm doing so everyone will understand how awesome I am. So so all of these things in so many ways have such a personal connect. And then you finally get to a point where you're just at this desperation point where it's like, I can't live like this anymore. This is just costing me too much. So I've got to find something that I can connect with. And so I think sometimes that desperation opens up your mind to things you wouldn't have maybe been open to before, because you just know you've got to find a way to move this through, to heal, to deal, to get on a better way of living and seeing yourself. Would you say that? Because there are so many stigmas. I mean, we've talked about in the past with my friend Lindsay Kerr, we've talked about ketamine therapy on that. And microdosing is another one of those things. There's a lot of stigmas around and a lot of biases and a lot of bad information. And so being willing to go down that road and being in such a public space as you were learning this too. I mean, this wasn't just any old job. You were on the front, you were the face of a station. And so just that kind of, I think, can give people the idea of like, I had to do something. I had to get some kind of semblance of control in a healthy way and start defining who I was and seeing myself, or this is not going to work. There's going to be some really, really dramatic consequences if I don't right the ship on that. So how did you find this? Because you talk about meditation, there's a lot of things. You go to your website, you practice a lot of different things within this. You talk about somatics and meditation and yoga. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to these journeys and ways that you meet and help people that you're working with. How did you learn about, because the microdosing and these things are tricky. They're not legal in every state. I think it's becoming better now, but also to finding the right person to work with that knows how to do it in a way that's healthy and can get these really helpful results.
Sure. Yep. So, enough was enough for me when I continued to go to my therapist and she would say how great I was at therapy and how great I was at talking about my problems. And then I'd sit in the car afterwards and feel terrible. Like, this does not make sense. And so I don't know where I was, but I was listening to a podcast. And that's where I heard about microdosing. I listened to a woman, her name is Bijou Finney. I don't know what show she was on, but I was just immediately intrigued. And interestingly enough, my news director had asked me to do a story about microdosing a couple of years before for my weekly series, which was called Your Best Life. And I looked at him and was like, how am I going to do that if it's illegal? And that was the only conversation. So I actually still credit him to this day with being the one who planted the first seed. And he's a deadhead. So of course he planted that seed. So anyway, so I heard Bijou on a podcast and she was talking specifically about how psilocybin or magic mushrooms can be really beneficial to assisting people as they deal with sexual shame or sexual trauma. And I'm like, let me get this woman on my podcast. I invited her onto my show. And as soon as we hung up the call, I'm like, okay, I've got to hire you. Like, this seems like the necessary next step. And so while I was doing that in early 2022, I was also sick. I had been sick in early 22 and I was still anchoring at this time from early January through March. And I could not figure out what was wrong. I thought I had COVID. I took a week off of work. I kept testing negative, but it felt like COVID.
Yeah.
And I had been the essential anchor at work for the whole pandemic. So everyone else got to sit at home and I had to go into work. And that was just a whole new secondary trauma for me and so much more stress and activation. And TV news is like fight and flight every single day. I
Mhm.
can't believe it. So little did I know and understand at that point, because I was in it, I was in massive burnout. I was in like late stage burnout.
Mm.
And so microdosing had, while in late stage burnout,
Yeah.
activated even more things. And the joke in the psychedelic space is like, the medicine will show you what is for you and what is not for you. A couple
Mm.
months after I began, I'd say 3 months after I started my microdosing, I took leave from my work. I
Mm.
took a mental health leave. I was blessed to be able to qualify for FMLA for that. And then I never went back.
Mm.
And mushrooms really showed me what I was supposed to be doing and what I was not supposed to be doing. And then a
Yeah.
lot of other things happened. It was a very dark night of the soul. Um, but I share all of that because I heard about it on a podcast, and
Yeah.
it was like in my body. I just felt, okay, maybe this is it. Like, oh my gosh, there was hope because I've been
Yeah.
doing everything. I had been prescribed meds. I had been in therapy. I had gone to multiple different therapists. I had tried EMDR. I had, like you said, done all of the things.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like mushrooms in these tiny little doses where I wasn't high. I could still go about my everyday life, helped me open the door to my subconscious and look at it with like a flashlight so I could shine it on the things that I was ready to look at little by little.
Yeah.
And it opened the door, right? Like I was
Yeah.
so consciously blocking that through my intellectualizing of my trauma that I
Yeah.
couldn't get into the body and into those layers underneath. And
Yeah.
so that's how I found it. I will say, and I think you really put this and hit the nail on the head, right? Like there is so much taboo, there is so much bias. And when this is for you, you will not need convincing. You will likely still
Mm.
have to do a little deprogramming because I certainly did.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
will then begin to ask yourself things like, and I think the pandemic made me ask this too. Why would a loving government not want me to expand my consciousness?
Mhm.
Why would
Mhm.
they want me to stay sick?
Yeah.
Why, and so those types of questions begin to be the ones that we're asking. And you get to the answers that you get to, they'll be individual to you. But like that all comes, I think, from taking that step into the unknown and taking a step into things that can feel really scary because it did feel so scary. And I
Mhm.
wasn't talking about it on the internet. I wasn't telling anybody. I didn't tell a
Yeah.
soul at this
Yeah.
point. So that's a whole other can of worms when I like came out of the psychedelic closet online.
Yeah.
Um, but that's how I found it. I found it in a podcast. I felt like that woman, and she was a great coach. She was a great mentor. She
Mm.
just spoke straight to what I needed.
Mhm.
And um, yeah, I think she really helped to foster within me, as did the mushrooms, the purpose and life path that I'm on now. And I think I was in my purpose and in my path as an anchor,
Yeah.
because I really did see myself, and I continue to see myself as someone who lights the way and shines a light on the little dark places in society,
Sure.
just doing it in a slightly different way now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. I think it's, did you notice before you started going, were there things showing up for you physically that were manifesting? And this doesn't always show up for a while. For me, things didn't really show up physically for a while, but were you noticing things were showing up for you physically before you started going down this road? And you're like, we just kind of blame it on other things. Like I had, or were you so disassociated that it's like, no, I'm just zipping through, I'm shutting down, I don't feel anything.
Well, the first thing that started to happen when I started my healing in 2019, which is when my spiritual awakening happened, is I
Yeah.
started to have these like intuitive hits during my meditations that I had to come off of birth control because I was stifling my feminine energy. And I was like,
Mm.
wait, what even is feminine energy?
Yeah.
So then I came off of birth control, lost my libido completely. You talked about numbness. My clit and my vulva so numb. They were so numb for months afterwards. And so
Wow.
that physical manifestation, lo and behold, ta-da, spoiler alert, it was sexual shame. It was that
Yeah.
sexual trauma of having that stigma, right? And I
Yeah.
and I say, what I had is sexual trauma because trauma isn't about what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so while no violence was done on me, I took what happened and that stigma that I placed on myself and society placed on myself and the judgment that I got from that partner and from my parents. And yeah, that was traumatic. So,
Yeah.
yes, things definitely did manifest. What was fascinating in the 3 months of early 2022, I had a lot of issues with my voice
Oh, wow.
while I was sick
Wow.
and burnt out. I'm like, oh,
Wow.
that's so funny.
Yeah.
And so, but like at that point, I was still holding on to my career with like a death grip, man. Like
Yeah.
I did not want to let go. That was my whole identity. It's everything that I
Yeah.
have wanted to be since I was in 5th grade. And I was like literally a death grasp, prying
Yeah.
my cold, dead fingers away from this career. And mushrooms finally let me understand to just let go. But yeah, there
Yeah.
were a lot of things that manifested.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to look back.
Right. Because you don't know it at the moment, but
Right.
you can look back on it and you're like, oh, that's what that was. I mean,
Yep.
it's so interesting the way the body works and the way that so many times we look at our bodies as being against us, and our bodies are actually really, really for us and trying to give us clues and let us know that something needs to be addressed. And I think that what you're talking about and this modality that's worked for you is another example of being able to tap into those areas. Because sometimes things are stuffed down and buried so difficultly, like, talking about leaving talk therapy and just feeling miserable and in tears afterwards, that doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes that's
Right.
re-traumatizing,
Right.
and so it's not, so being mindful of the fact that if you try one thing, it feels like that,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different avenues you can take out there, and being open to those, because you are worth healing and you are worthy of being your most authentic, beautiful self as you are, with all of your layers and pieces and parts of you. But that can be really difficult, especially when you've been stuffing and so many things that are shrouded in shame that you want to hide, that you wish never happened. And you talked about, earlier, the trauma comes and how you process it. There's a lot of damage that's done when people that you love and respect and thought were for you have such a heavy opinion or judgment about something that's happened to you that doesn't feel like unconditional love at all. It feels really hurtful. That has a deep, deep impact.
For sure. And for me, what's interesting, and this is such a pattern that I have been, reminded of constantly, is, my family wasn't really verbally judgy. They just
Yeah.
didn't talk about it. It was like it didn't exist. It was completely ignored. And it was
Mm.
just for me a chasm, that like a separation,
Yeah.
right? And when we talk about trauma, like trauma often is a separation. And that
Yeah.
has and will continue to be just this massive, you know, shift that happened when I was 18, and so it doesn't always look like them berating you or putting it out there, putting you on blast, or like talking down to you. Sometimes it's them not saying it at all, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
and that was in 2004, 2005. I guess it was 2005. And so therapy wasn't even like a real thing. I was away at college. Like it
Yeah.
was like out of sight, out of mind. And
And
I
sweep it under
filled
the
the
rug
hole.
and we'll
Yeah.
never talk about it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I filled that hole, that chasm within
Yeah.
myself, with the alcohol, with the overachieving, and with starving myself. And then when I would finally eat, throwing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding all those other ways to be. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because there are a lot of when you live in a fishbowl and you live in a background in a family whose jobs, environment, choices kind of put you there by nature of just the type of job and in space and community that you're in. It is all about appearance. It is all about what looks. And so there are things, I mean, I remember even growing up, it was very taboo to talk about what was happening in our family that wasn't good or healthy. It was very taboo to talk to anybody outside of the house about it. That was unacceptable. I went to a family friend who also happened to be our high school assistant principal and athletic director. and he was in the same faith community as we were. And there was some things happening in my home with my dad and in general that I was just really concerned about, and was like kind of being asked to carry a load that I didn't feel like it was really my 15-year-old self to carry. And I went to him and talked to him about it in hopes that maybe he could help me navigate this or find someone that could help. And so I didn't overtly tell him, don't tell my parents I came and talked to you. So he circled back. He's like, I'm really concerned. She came to me. I got in trouble. I got grounded for
Oh,
going. I got grounded for going and
no.
talking about that thing that was happening within our family dynamic outside, because now other people knew that we didn't have it all together. And it was, those kinds of things. So that I know what you mean about that. Like, nope, this is who we are. This is the persona that we will be, and we will not be anything different. And don't you dare say otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's
So
that's a
tricky.
heavy load with that. All right. How we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically. You have really in your journey grown into this space, and now you're helping other women as well. Talk to me about the progression of getting to like, okay, I've finally gotten to this space myself. Oh, I think I can help others with this too.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was a coworker back in 2021. It was very much a joke where like the anchors always continue to get older and older, but everyone else stays the same age. The joke, it's because all the new reporters are always like 22, 23. And so it was a newer reporter. Her name is Nikki. And she would come to me for like life advice. And so she told me one day, she's like, you should be a life coach. I was like, oh, that's so sweet of you to say. Because I had thought, oh, well, maybe I wanted to go do counseling or do therapy. And this was, back in my late 20s. So that was just sort of like something that was floating in the ether, right? This thing she had said. And where for me it began to shift though was, as I started to learn about my menstrual cycle and learn all the things I did not know.
Yeah.
Right. I came off of the pill after being on it for 16 years. I'm 33, 34 years old. We're in the pandemic. The doctor can't see me. And also the doctor can't really help me.
Yeah.
And so I have to scour the internet. Now I have a special set of skills, basically Liam Neeson, when it comes to investigating information. I was put on this planet to be someone who is a researcher. I research it all. I try it all. I'm like a little experimenter. And so I am very good at pulling information and synthesizing that into things that make sense for people. And I always knew that. That was probably why I was really good at my job.
Yeah.
I started to do that with menstrual cycle information. And then I went into a coaching certification for that. And when I began to work one-on-one with clients around their cycle, that's, I think, when things started to shift, because they'd come to me with period pain, and underneath it was sexual assault. Or underneath it was some other sexual trauma. And then it really started to bubble up in myself, my own trauma, my own sexual shame. And so how did I become someone who could then help be an initiator of those in initiation or a witness to their rites of passage? I think it was because I did work to make the things that were wounds for me into scars. And so what I mean by that is there are things in your life that are pillars around your healing. And when they become scars and not wounds, that is a really great time to start sharing about that if you feel called. But we do not share about our wounds because that still feels too raw. So a great example of this is, I'm coaching in the coaching space from 2021 on, and I do not talk about herpes. I talk about it with my clients. I think I'd mentioned it on a podcast once or twice, but I had never come out of the closet on being like, ta-da, I have herpes. Because it was still a little bit of a wound. Well, thanks to mushrooms, thanks to a lot of inner work and this inner thing within me that hates a secret. I hate a secret.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, I need to, what? It's time. So a year ago, I came out on the internet and posted, about having herpes very publicly. And it went about as good as you would think it would go. No, I'm kidding. It went actually really well. The person that was the most upset was like the most surprising person. It was an ex-boyfriend, but it wasn't the ex-boyfriend. It was a different one.
Oh, wow.
And so I was shocked at how upset he was. But, he was like, he wanted me to take it down and that I had somehow hurt his relationship and hadn't spoken to this man in 20 years. I'm like, you know what? I will never take this down because it is what I needed when I was 18. I needed me.
Mm-hmm.
I needed me. And let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you how many young women have come to me for advice and for just someone to hold their hand a little bit,
Yeah.
virtually mostly, because of their own recent diagnosis. I'm like, okay, that solidified and confirmed for me that that thing that was like the skeleton in my closet that was such a
Mm-hmm.
festering wound for almost 20 years.
Mm.
When I did the work to heal it and it became a scar so that it could be out in the world, it was
Yeah.
healing for others too.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have herpes to like have this work, right?
Right. But
Whatever it
yeah.
is that you are going through, right? When
Yeah.
you get to the place where you have looked at that shadow enough, you've looked at that trigger, you've looked at that trauma enough, and you can confidently feel it is a scar now and not a wound,
Mm-hmm.
that's, I believe, your permission to begin talking about that because you never know who
No.
you're going to help. You never know. And for
No.
me, that was really, I think, a key part of my like coming into my authenticity because it felt like something I had hidden for so long. And
Yeah.
the other thing I thought to myself when I started to do that, when I started to share that, it's like, can anyone hurt me if I share this?
Mm.
And the answer was no, because my husband,
Yeah.
he's known since day one of our relationship. My
Mm-hmm.
parents know, and they are either watching my Instagram things or they're not, who can say? And it's like, and I didn't have a job. Now I have probably made myself fairly unemployable, but that's why I work for myself. And like no one could hurt me in that decision. And so for
Yeah.
me, that was what unapologetically being authentic looked like. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, here it is. Let me just bear it all. And my nervous system really didn't like it for about 24 hours. And then we settled back into it and we continued to remind ourselves through our practices and through, the loving supportive system that I have, that it was absolutely the right call.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when it is. I think too, when you go into work and where you've decided, okay, I'm going to take this next step, I'm going to help others too. It wakes up an authenticity because it's like, if I'm going to invite others to be authentic and open and feel safe, then I've got to do that too. I've got to model that in all these different areas. And so I think that can really awaken that part of you too. And once you do it and you're like, oh, wait a minute, everything's okay. The world did not cave in. And the people that love me and know me and want what's well and good for me are here, standing with me, supporting me in this. And I'm here for me. And
Yeah.
because you said something important earlier, that you were the voice that you needed when you were 18 years old. And I think that can be so true for so many times. And you just never know the impact that
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have on someone. And sometimes it's the people you least expect. I mean,
Right.
you never know who's going to show up being the ones that needed that thing, that needed that permission,
Yeah.
which talk to me about your word permissionary. This is a good place to launch into this before we go into the why and values piece of our conversation.
Well, I cannot say that I came up with it.
Okay.
I first heard it from Rachel Pringle, who was on my show years
Mm,
ago. But I kind of love it just because, in my opinion, it is, someone who goes out and proselytizes that you have permission to do whatever you want,
yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you, so long as you're not hurting someone, let me say that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like in your healing journey, you have permission to try the thing, to say no to the thing, to take a break from healing, right? Like there's such a trap of
Yes.
self-improvement. Like if you want to stop, just stop, honey. Like you can stop. You can just take a pause. And so the other thing that I really felt was so, I mean, the tongue-in-cheekness of the fact that like I'm a preacher's kid, my husband was a missionary kid, like the permissionary and the little rebel in me.
I love that so much. That makes the story even better. But I love that. But I think so many times as women, we feel like that. We feel like
Mhm.
we've got to have permission because of all the narratives and stereotypes, especially if you've come up in a really conservative faith
Right.
space that just manifests those things even more. So thank you for sharing that. I love that so much. And this really goes back into a- as you went on this journey, it was really a time for you to discover your why, your values. And that can be really tricky to parse those out from what it was you grew up with. I was like, okay, I had to pull out what's actually mine here, what I actually believe and value versus what I was told I was supposed to. And on this stage in this looking glass in fishbowl was being protruded out, but wasn't necessarily what was it within me.
Right. Yeah. I think the biggest thing that helped me was coming into my spiritual connection with the divine feminine. I
Mm.
think I spent all of my 20s, well, since 18 on, very mad at God, very mad at
Yeah.
God. And, because I had been told my whole life, if you have sex before marriage, something bad will happen. And something bad did happen. And
Yes.
so I'm like, wow, I'm so mad. I'm so angry. And also I felt like I couldn't really be in the church because of this like red scarlet H that now
Oh,
I
yeah.
had.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like that was how I was treated. I have to point that out. Like that was me, my internalized judgment on myself, my internalized bias. Like I don't think I actually experienced these things consciously, but like I was
Mhm.
in such a shame spiral that I felt that way internally. And so everything revolved around that shame spiral. And
Yeah.
so um finding the divine feminine for me was so instrumental back in 2019 because I had really spent a lot of time probably agnostic, never atheist, but like something bigger is out there, and yet I just can't wrap my head around it being like the fatherhead, the godhead three, that male figure only.
Yeah.
Because and as I connected to my menstrual cycle, I'm like, yeah, I really can't get down with that. I just don't, it don't make sense. The math
Yeah.
ain't mathin'. And
Yeah.
so I found that by connecting with my cycle, by connecting with the archetypes within myself of maiden,
Mhm.
mother, wild woman, crone throughout each phase of my menstrual cycle, and then aligning that with the divine feminine, for me, it really did start to help me live my life in a way that felt more sacred. And for me,
Mm.
learning that that could still be a major value for me. Because I think I really
Yeah.
always had this desire to like be around ritual and to be around things that were sacred and to have that connection to something bigger than myself. And
Mhm.
yet it got like cut off because of how I was taught that there was just one way.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was very much connecting to the divine within me, which mushrooms help me see,
Mhm.
and connecting with the idea that there is this greater creatrix life force energy out there that I am a divine embodiment of here on earth.
Yeah.
And so that certainly helped me understand, how I wanted to live my life and how I want my life to look. And as someone who was highly successful, an overachiever, addicted to hustling, I was very much in my wounded masculine energy. The whole world is in a wounded masculine energy
Mhm.
phase in this capitalistic materialist society. And
Yeah.
so a big part of my healing had to come from me getting more connected to the divine feminine. Even when I was beginning as a menstrual cycle coach, I joke about this. I'm about to do a podcast episode for my show where I talk about how I masculined my menstrual cycle and it did not work. Like
Yes.
that, like the biohackers who want to like cycle sync to do X, Y, and Z, I really see that as a very masculine approach to your menstrual cycle. And like,
Mhm.
goddess bless you. Like, yes, maybe it'll work for you. It did not work for me. I just
Yeah.
got more burnt out. So I
Yeah.
had to connect to the idea of flow, of
Mhm.
slowness, and when I finally understood what that could feel like in the body, I
Mhm.
think that's when I finally understood how I wanted to live my life, how I wanted my day to day life to look.
Mm.
And yeah, I think my values just really started to back that up thanks to the embodiment work and thanks to that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think you hit on such an important piece. And I think I know we talk about it all the time. It going back to 2020, it just really forced us inside ourselves and to really take a retrospective look at things. And I did the same thing. And our daughters did. We have 3 grown daughters. We all did on our own in our own way. Really took a step back from these spaces we had been inhabiting and look at things. And I was finally, I went from a Mormon space to an evangelical space. And the evangelical space felt more free than the Mormon space. But over time, I realized it was a lot of the same narratives and a lot of the same messaging and all these different kinds of things. And I kind of got to this breaking point in 2020. I'm like, I have been my whole life trying to make myself fit this square, brown peg into this square box or vice versa. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. And I've always found ways to explain away the parts that weren't sitting right with me. And I wasn't listening to my inner knowing and I wasn't trusting my inner wisdom because this other patriarchal approach had told me that wasn't the right way and that was wrong.
Yes.
And that was being tempted by the devil and all these other things instead of and I finally had to sit with myself and be like, this way I've been going about it has not worked. I am in this entangled anxiety fit of a mess at 50 years old that nobody on the outside knew about. I looked like I had all things going great gangbusters, but within me and my family knew, my family sensed. And I finally just had to take it all apart and kind of burn it all down. And within that found this like, as we're 50% of the population here. There's this all patriarchal way of existing doesn't make sense. I mean, it just doesn't add up. And that can be a very revealing, very freeing when you finally get in touch with what it is you're connecting with versus what you've been told and be able to parse out the difference and remove the fear because it's so fear-based to keep you in line on this one trajectory. And the allowance for exploration and really finding your connection to what God feels like to you, what the divine feels like to you, doesn't feel like a place you can go. But when you finally give yourself, going back to permissionary, the permission to do that and explore it and find your connection, it really does offer up, it really opens up that ability to show up authentically without apology anymore. Of like, this is where I've landed
Yeah.
at. My body finally feels in alignment with how I'm proceeding and how I'm doing. I'm finally not getting these nudges that I'm pushing back. And because I was told at such a young age that my body wasn't trustworthy and it would lead me astray and not to listen, to that and be drugged down by that. And you're I know you understand that very well when you finally get to a place like, no, this body was given to me and created by a divine with all these tools equipped in a way to take care of me, for me to listen to, for me to trust and follow and see as the guide that it is.
100%. And I love that. I think you just, man, hit the nail on the head because I think that so much of the work that I do with myself and such a key part of my values with clients is helping women remember what you already know. And yet society
Yeah.
has made you forget because like you said, if God gave us this body, like, why are we not supposed to trust it? Like, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the
Yeah.
medicalized Western medical model will tell you not to trust your body. Church will tell you do not trust it. It is the flesh. And so, yeah, wow. Thank you for pointing that part out because yes, remembering that you can trust yourself. Like you have the sovereign right to make your own choices for your own self, and your body will show you the way when you can learn to understand the language that she is speaking to you, which is hard in this
Yes.
world.
Yeah. Because
And
we've
yet
been
is
taught
very
out of
possible.
it. Yes. Yeah. And we have to, and we have to remove the fear. And I really learned too, I think that you have too, of like anything based in fear is not good for me. That's not a good thing. If it's based in fear and not in love and trust, not that things won't be hard, but if fear is the mechanism that's being used to keep me in line or keep me in a place, that's not from God.
No.
That it's just not from, and that's not divine. That's not loving. That's not welcoming, kind, and that's not That's not what I was created for. So yeah, I think that's such an important part, and it's an important part of that showing up unapologetic, embracing your values, knowing what your why is, what you were created to be, and how you were created to show up in the world for yourself and for others. And that goes nicely into living out of your own expectations versus others. Your journey is the whole journey of that. And we've really been hitting on that all along, but to kind of bring that home for me as we hit this talking point.
Yeah, I think that um yeah. I really do think that whatever happened in 2022 on a cellular level when I started to eat these mushrooms
Yeah.
really just catapulted me into a place where I started to see what I really wanted in life and didn't feel as afraid to grab it.
Mm.
And so the expectation was probably for me to stay in TV. I was making six figures. Why would I have left? That's psycho.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
To go work for yourself in the most taboo of ways.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I have an amazing husband who supports me through and through and through. And he's also an entrepreneur. So he gets a lot of the stress. But
Mhm.
like making a life that felt like success to me, you know, looked different after 2022, right? Like I had made the
Yeah.
money, I had gotten to the job, I had done all the things I'd wanted to do since I was in fifth grade. And then I got to look again at what success felt like. And for me
Mhm.
now, the most successful I ever feel and the expectations that I now like allow that success to become is like when I get to sit outside on my porch, listen to all of my birds, have morning coffee, be so slow, hang out with my dog, and like go for a walk when I want to go for a walk, go, work with clients at a time when I feel like I want to work with clients, talk to you on a podcast it's like that is success. It
Yeah.
doesn't look like for me anymore this like certain monetary value or this certain title, and that was
Mhm.
not me 10 years ago. That was not me probably 7 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what's happened is as I've peeled back these layers and layers of societal programming and expectations of what I should do and like family expectations and like, oh my gosh, what is the word I'm looking for? Like your potential.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes. Oh,
When you
boy.
begin to peel back that and like understand that just being right here, just having the time to have like a breath and like a coffee
Yeah.
with a friend, and it's like that can become such a sweet, beautiful spot that now this is what success looks like, or this is what,
Yeah.
an expectation of life can look like. And my husband and I have been talking about, what do we want the 3-year plan to look like? What do we want the 5-year plan to look like? And, we're child free by choice, another expectation that
Yeah.
is vastly against society.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is the mushrooms allowed me to come to this place where I understood and continue to learn because I'm still on the path of understanding what
Yeah.
it is that I truly want, what I truly feel is for me. And so now I'm able to make those new decisions and live from that place, live from that
Mm.
area of expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is kind of tied into that. Talk to me about how you brought all of this together into what you offer women now, because you have these different pieces. You went from a cycle coach, but also realizing
Yep.
how much the mushroom piece, microdosing piece could help as well. Talk to me about that kind of bringing of this all together.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, I started off as a menstrual cycle coach, and then I started to see deep layers of trauma be held in the wombs of the people that I was working with. And so I knew that I needed some way to
Mm.
get to that. It was my own story. It was the story of the women that were coming to me. And so I took additional trainings, trauma informed trainings around somatic therapy, and then again, layered in my trainings with psychedelics um, to finally manifest what it is that I do now with work, which is helping women reconnect to their body
Mm.
through somatics, somatic breath work specifically, and psychedelics.
Okay.
So it's very much morphed. I used to be very psychedelic first, very
Mm.
psychedelic forward. And now what
Yeah.
I've realized is nervous system regulation is absolutely the first thing that I work with people
Mm.
on. And then we let them eat some mushrooms in a couple weeks if they want to. Um, because I really think that you can have massive changes within your life. You can see massive changes within your connection to your body through somatics, through breath work, through intentional cyclical living, even if you do not
Mhm.
have a cycle, and through
Mhm.
connecting to your body. And then
Yeah.
mushrooms really do come in as this beautiful extra layer. It's like the glitter sprinkled
Yeah.
on top to say, like, all right, now we're going to rocket you into the next phase. So that's
Okay.
what I do to help the women that I work with. I work in group and I also work with individuals. Um, and so that's sort of how the ecosystem, the ecology of my offerings is that they all pair so beautifully together.
Sure.
And there's a whole, I talk about it on my podcast, which folks can check out, to hear all of that. But I
Yeah.
do like to look at it as like an ecology. How are these things in relationship to each other?
Yeah.
The cycle, the womb, the breath, somatics, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And I brought that up with the expectations piece we were talking about because the way if people look at it on the surface, it might not be the expected combinations for people to see. So I wanted to give you a moment to really bring that all together for people and understand how it is you got there and why it is you offer it in that way. So thank you so much for that. That was such a great explanation. I love the ecological piece too. That really brought it together for me as I've been looking at your stuff the last few weeks. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. You have displayed that really beautifully, and layers have come up multiple times in our conversation, which is, I mean, as I was looking for your stuff, I knew you were going to be so naturally aligned because you understand that piece so intuitively. What do you tell? You've obviously been on your own journey of accepting these layers. So how do you, when you're helping others, how do you introduce that concept to them? Because that, for people that haven't talked about it or thought about it in that way before, um, you kind of have to find a bridge or a place to approach them with because it can feel very overwhelming if it's not language or a journey you've already been on for a little bit.
Yeah. I think what's helpful is maybe not necessarily using the term layers, but
Mm,
using the term parts.
mm,
And, I'm not someone who is, I've taken a training around parts work, but I'm
yeah.
not a parts work, therapist or anything. But
Okay.
anyone can understand this idea, right? Because
Yeah.
there's that colloquial phrase like, well, a part of me kind of wants to go to the party and a part of me really just wants to stay home.
Hmm.
Yes. If you understand that, like duality of like wanting a thing and also
Yeah.
wanting a different thing, then this is a layer, right?
Yeah.
So a part of me feels like, we'll just keep with this analogy. A part of me feels like I really want to go to the party. Okay. And a part of me feels like I don't really want to see all these people. What could that be showing me? And especially if these then become habits, that's another thing that we can look at. What part
Mm,
of you is habitual? So it's like it's so fascinatingly layered.
yes.
So for me, what I'm currently going through and what I'm currently working on is the layers of myself that are very deeply rooted in functional freeze. And I picked
Mm,
up on that and noticed that was a layer because of these little parts of me that continued to want to like stay at home, bed rot, doom scroll, even though I know logically and cognitively that's not good for me.
yeah.
But that was a deep layer that was like a part of me stuck in that situation.
Yeah.
So when I work with people and start to help them understand, it's either, all right, let's talk about what parts of you came up during this argument. Like a part of you
Mm,
um, really wanted to speak up, or a part of you wanted to shut down. The other thing that you can look at is just allowing them to have the analogy of the onion. Like that's
yeah.
very much something I use with people who are doing psychedelic work. Microdosing will start to help you unpeel layer by layer
Mm,
all of the different little parts of yourselves.
okay.
Here is the part of me that is, scared to speak for myself. Here's the part of me that, is a little wounded by this past relationship, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
Microdosing is really good at helping you peel back those things and then notice by like laying all the layers out. Oh, this is why I am the way I am. So for me,
Mm,
I was so addicted to hustling because deeply inside of the core of this onion is this wound around being afraid of not being lovable.
mm,
Right. And so that's, I guess I share my own experience of learning through my layers to help them kind of get the premise of what layers are, and
Yeah.
then helping them dig through their own layers to
Yeah.
see, oh, what could this be showing? Because it's very
Yeah.
subjective, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's really only in hindsight that we get these aha moments a lot of the time.
Yeah.
However, I will say that one of the things I love about psychedelics is that you have aha moments in real time. Like, it
Mm.
is such an interesting, I say, if you've have you seen the Hunger Games, like
Yeah.
how, they've got like the people in the bubble out there that are like the game makers.
Mhm.
I see microdosing as like making you the game maker where you can like look down in
Oh.
any situation with like this ability to presence yourself and pause. Like, okay, I could choose your own adventure. I could react this way and it'll probably go this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. Or I could
Mhm.
do this and this. So like I share
Mm.
that to your ask about like how do I help people understand the layers to explain that psychedelics are really great at helping you unpack these little layers and then
Yeah.
also notice in real time that you're doing that work. It's
Yeah.
just such a funny way. It's like you'll just zoom out so fast. You're like, oh my gosh, this is a layer. This is my part that is upset about this. And oh, this is connected to my root wound. So
Yeah.
that might
Well,
not
and
make that
then
much sense, but
no, I see what you're saying, and it also
okay.
allows you to see the choices that you have available to you. Because I
Exactly.
think so many times we feel like we don't have a choice. We're stuck in this situation, and it allows us to see it from a place of having choices. And also for me, I always talk to people about get curious rather than judgmental.
Perfect.
Get
Yes.
curious about why it is you're responding that way and what that's rooted in. And why, instead of beating yourself up for making that decision when you were 18 years old, what was going on around you that played into that? What part of that, and what do you still carry with you now that is connected to that? And my couple things that you said, that piece, and my therapist told me a few years ago, and you hit on this a little while ago, that when we go on, I went to therapy and I'm like, I'm going to do this for 6 months and I'm going to be better. And then I'm just
Yep.
going to move on with my life. 5 years later, here we are. I've moved to different state, had to get a new therapist, but what I learned is like, this is like a journey. It's a continuation, and I'm going to pull back one layer and I'm going to heal. I'm going to learn something new about myself. I'm going to go this different way, but also I can take a break. My therapist that I had, my first one, who was able to journey with for 4 years and make so much progress with, she was like, you're not doing anything on this vacation or this weekend, no journaling. No, you're just going to take a break. I want you to veg out in front of Netflix. I want you to go to that football, whatever it is, go on a walk, eat a bunch of chocolate, whatever it is you're going to do, you're going to give yourself a break. You are not going to take 10 steps back if you quit working on healing, because if you've got to give yourself rest and a chance to regenerate and rejuvenate. You don't want this to become a an item on your checklist, because I love a good checklist where I can show everybody how much I'm doing and how great I
Yes.
am and how much I'm accomplishing. And so really had to like release that from myself and take apart that narrative and what it was feeding. And that was such a revelation to me, but also, yeah, just, and then bringing in that curiosity and pulling things back and seeing that you have choices and understanding the why behind where you came from and what informed that. And yes, of course, I won't make that decision again. It was terrible, but also not going to, live in this shame spiral and beat myself up
Right.
for it either, because I understand how I got there. So yeah, thank you for all of that. So good. All right. In living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which is what your journey is such a great example of, such a story of. Talk to me about how that's impacted your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with other people.
Mm. I see finding empowerment, embracing layers as self intimacy. Honestly,
Yeah.
like, I know myself so well now that you had mentioned earlier coming from a place of fear. Like
Mm-hmm.
and this happens as an entrepreneur, let's say you think you need to hire a coach or you need to invest in this new thing. I now can pinpoint within my body pretty quickly, is this fear? Is this a fear response? Is this excitement? Is this a good excitement? Or is it a yes or a no? So that I think has been the most impactful day to day thing that has come from me doing this work is
Mhm.
being able to very quickly within my body get a good reading on, okay, is this fear, is this love, does this feel expansive, does this feel contracting, does this feel like something that I'm excited about or something I want to run from. So
Yeah.
that self intimacy has been deeply impacted by the work with mushrooms, by the work with my cycle. And then as far as my relationships go, I think that as I become even better at knowing myself, I'm able to show up as my fullest self and allow myself to be loved. And so that deeply
Mm.
impacts my relationship with my husband. It deeply impacts my ability to be in relationship with women as
Mhm.
friends, right? Because I didn't see my mom with close friends.
Yeah.
And that deeply embedded in me that women were
Mm.
untrustworthy. And
Yeah.
so then you throw me into one of the most highly competitive job
Oh,
markets out
jeez.
there.
Absolutely. Oh my
And
gosh.
I was really blessed, where there were a couple of women who were pretty backstabby. But for the most part, I felt like it was okay, right? I didn't feel like it was that mean girl mentality. And maybe I
Yeah.
was oblivious to it. I remember like one place that it was very much mean girl. But
Mhm.
I really do just think that the more I know myself, the more I see my relationship with myself grow, the relationship with my body grow, the relationship with my language of my body, the more I'm able
Mm.
to, like I said, radiate out, understand what I will and will not accept.
Yeah.
And that's deeply affected relationships because when I got sober, I had to cut a lot of people off. I
Yeah.
no longer am available for your small talk. I'm no longer available for, people who believe certain things. And I think I wouldn't have been here if I hadn't been doing that work of feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's such a good example. And you and I talked about this before we got on, this showing up unapologetically and supporting other women in doing so. We've got to get rid of this idea that was put out there. It's been out there for thousands of years. We've seen it play out in different ways over and over again. That if you're going to make it in the world as a woman, you got to knock every other woman down on the way. That's just playing into the patriarchy's hand. That's just playing into old stigmas, old narratives' hands. There's room for all of us. There's multiple ways for us to all show up. Different people are going to connect with us in different ways. And it's important for all of us to lift each other up and let each other know we exist. So those people that need to find us can find us. And
For
maybe
sure.
they only hear about us or see us because we're supporting each other in the process. But to stop this idea of being threatened by and celebrate it, because when you succeed, I succeed. It opens another door, it grows another opportunity. And we have to start embodying and embracing that piece rather. And so if we're going to really make meaningful shifts for women in the world when it comes to our well-being, our health, our safety, continue to push these narratives, researching real science, real information about what's best and healthy for us, and not believing this idea of that's the way it's always been done, so that's the way we're going to do it. And when people push back against it, get curious about that. Why are they pushing back? What are they afraid of? Why do they feel threatened? I mean, there's room and for all of us. It shouldn't be a threat or a problem to anybody who's living authentically and well and healthy. And so, but it's that us having these conversations and pointing those things out. It's so interesting to me. You brought up here is your mom as a pastor's wife. But I've known a lot of pastors' wives over the years. That's a very lonely place to reside because of
Very.
the expectations, because people treat you as this other and you're on this pedestal, but also they don't know how to connect with you, but also they're afraid to let you know who they really are because you're this other and you're just a human trying that needs community and people too. I mean, and so it's such an interesting dynamic in a space and place that is supposed to be about Jesus and community and love and inclusion. It can be such an isolating space for so many women.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for all of that. And I'm glad we got to bring that up because I wanted to touch on that. that piece and that importance of us showing up for each other, for ourselves and each other in that way. Coming down to the rapid fire here at the end, name 5 activities that nourish you.
Syncing with my cycle, bird watching, painting, self pleasure, and I will say, obviously, eating mushrooms.
Nice. I love that you brought those things up and you did it with a smile. And when you think back to yourself 10 to 15 years ago, it must give you such great joy to know that you're in a space where you can do that authentically now and feel safe in doing so. I mean, I always love those things that you untap. They're like, man, if myself 10 or 15 years ago could see me now,
Yeah.
it's always such a fun kind of space to sit in for a minute and reflect on your journey. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Oh, the next 6 months, bless us.
I know.
Free. I want to feel free.
Yeah, hopefully still.
I want to feel mystical. I want to feel empowered. I want to feel light, and I want to feel grounded at the same time.
Yeah. I love that. All right. Tell people how they can find you, follow you, learn more from you. This is also going to be on our website on embracinglayers.com, on our resources page. It'll be there forever once the episode drops. But share with people right now where they can find Leslie Draffin, or like, okay, this connected with me. I want to find this right now.
Perfect. Well, I am on social medias at Leslie Draffin. I have a podcast, The Light Within. But if you're listening and you would like to dip your toe into the ecology of my offerings, then the best place to start is with my shift method. It is a 9-minute somatic practice I created last year when I was in the depths of grief to help you get out of your head and into your body. No meditation required. So I have a super simple ebook that explains it all. It talks about the science behind shift, why it works with your nervous system. It's a practice that includes journaling, breathwork, and movement. And the best part about the shift method ebook is there are 3 super juicy playlists that are perfectly timed to help you use shift in your everyday life. So I'd love to give you a link to put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Within shift, you'll also find a link to my microdosing work. You can book a call through that same little ebook, and it gets you on my email list, because in the world that we live in, who can say what's going to happen? But email will still be there.
No kidding.
Hopefully.
We don't know what other socials are going to be there, but we're pretty sure email's still going to be there. I love it. Yeah, no kidding. What a time. Oh my goodness. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for this time today. I've loved this conversation. I look forward to future conversations with you. I think we have more of those coming. And I've just loved this time today to connect with you and share your voice with our audience, your story. Listeners, take a look and think about if anything you heard today was like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that. Unpack that. Get in, unpack that, and make sure that the information that you're using to guide that thought is actually based in truth. Is it based in stigma? And that's, like I said earlier, we've all got to find our way in the things that work for us. And there's going to be different modalities. But I think there's a lot of modalities out there that are available. This is one of them that we've talked about today with the microdosing that can be really helpful to people if we can get around the stigmas that exist and work with qualified people who know what they're doing this in a healthy way. Leslie is one of those people, but unpack that and dive into a little bit more of what's underlying that stigma, that fear, what needs to be unpacked. Get curious. Because we want you all to be well, and we want you to find tools and resources that are going to enable you to do that, to show up as your most authentic, healthy self, unapologetically in all the spaces you inhabit. So hopefully this will give you a little nudge and inspiration to do that, or encourage you if you're doing that already. But thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, Leslie, for your time. I've loved this conversation.
So have I. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, everybody, take care. Have a great week. Check out the resources page and check out Leslie's podcast. I got a chance to listen. It's got some great stuff on there, and all that'll be on our resources page in our show notes. But take good care and have a great week. Hello, Melissa Crook here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Field podcast today, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. I hope you found today's framework and resources supportive and informative. To learn more about all that we offer here at the Embracing Layers Network, visit embracinglayers.com. You can go to our contact form to schedule me as a speaker for your next conference, workshop, or seminar. You can go to our book page to order our book that Jessica Garrison, our wonderful and talented writer and author, authored with my support. And engage with this framework in written form, with your journal, or in a book club with other women, inviting them on this journey with you. You can look at our resources page for all of the helpful and insightful resources our guests offer and share. You can find the schedule for our weekly Together We Feel women's panel conversations that we're holding each Monday on our YouTube channel. And you can find the links to all the spaces and places you can follow, engage with us on social media, and join our engagements that are happening on our Substack site. There is also a donation page where you can donate to support our work to ensure we can continue to bring you these incredible guests, conversations, and support. Thanks again for joining me this week. Share with your friends and give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Your feedback helps us ensure we're bringing you the content that will best support you in having an empowered, embracing layers journey. Take good care, and thanks for giving us some of your valuable time today. We truly appreciate you so deeply.